So this our first full day is on the morning. We're gonna dedicate to Asuba, and the afternoon to contemplation of death. So it's quite a tough day today because we're gonna really, look at the body in a way we are usually not looking at. So it's particular features of the body we look at in a particular way in order to see the body in a different light than usual and bring a greater perspective to the experience of having or being a body and balancing out the message we get from our culture, which is a lot about needing to have a body who looks a certain way and is of a certain age and ideally would never die. And this is a very diluted way of thinking about the body, but that's just part and parcel of the culture. And I've noticed, especially here, in the US on the West Coast where I live, it looks like, dying and getting old is doing something wrong somehow. There's that underlying message that it shouldn't be that way. And I think this is so deluding, really, that I think, especially in this culture, to have that teaching is a really great, great blessing to bring balance and reality into the mix, which is so much needed. Because I've heard, even the models who appear on those beautiful papers and magazines, even they are already having really extreme, beautiful, and wonderful, bodies. Even those pictures are still being treated with certain ways to make them even more perfect, because nobody has a body like this really. But still, there is a conditioning, in us, having that assumption that this is the way we should all look. It's completely impossible. So asuba, as I mentioned yesterday, is the negation of the word suba, which is beautiful. So it speaks about the non-beautiful or the not beautiful, which doesn't mean ugly or disgusting or so, how it was, in earlier translations, it was sometimes as disgusting translated. And that's not, what we want to speak about today. But just looking at the body in a different way to make our mind much bigger than what it usually is in regards to the body, and look at different ways we normally don't look. And uh, there is generally three ways of looking at it. One way would be to look at it in regards to the layers: skin, flesh, and bones, so that we can do that as a guided meditation. Then the second way would be looking at that which meets the eye. And this is also part of the ordination ceremony for bhikkhunis. When, part is quite a long, long ceremony, but at one part, the upachaya, the monk or nun, who is the senior person at the ordination, gives us that teaching that whatever we see actually consists only of five things. It's skin, hair of the body, hair of the head, nails, and teeth. And then we say that in one order in the Pali language and then say it backwards. And that can also be a samadhi object for meditation, to just recite those words. First, in the order and then in the reverse order, and then go back and forth, and the mind can get really very still. And at the same time, when saying those words, we can, the image internally, the image can come up, or at least we can make a connection to that body part while we are saying the word. And the third way of doing this meditation is to recite or to chant the 32 parts of the body. And this is also part in our chanting book. And I just want to read out a few of them so that the chant goes like this. This which is my body, from the soles of the feet up and down from the crown of the head, is a sealed bag of skin filled with unattractive things. So that's the traditional chant. And then one lists the 32 parts of the body. And the first five are the five I mentioned before, which are given at the ordination ceremony. Kesa, hair of the head. Loma, hair of the body. Naka, nails. Danta, teeth. Tacho, skin. And then one goes again the reverse order. Tacho, Danta, Naka, Loma, Kesa. Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho. And that can be like, a meditation instruction. And then there's many more parts. I just read out a few. Sinews, kidney, liver, lungs, undigested food, excrement, blood, tears, mucus, urine, brain. So all of those parts, they are, reflected upon. And through that reflection, we become more and more aware that the body isn't like a thing, but the body is consisting of many, many different parts. And the body is incredibly vulnerable because of that. And it can give us like a sense of relief, really, because it's impossible to control the body. The body really belongs to nature. The body really is part of nature. And through this reflection, we more and more allow that truth to become part of the way we understand the body. And also, to see that it's not only about the body, but also about the relationship to food. And also about the body of others, because sometimes we can be quite infatuated with the body of others, and thinking of it in that way can help us to cool down the whole way of thinking about it. It's all about like cooling down and balancing out. It's not about becoming disgusted with the body, but it's about seeing the whole picture. And so much, I think, about the Dhamma teaching is about seeing the whole picture, seeing the whole spectrum, not only beginnings, but also endings. And that's really such an important part of the practice, to cultivate certain perceptions which we usually do not cultivate. Usually we like beginnings. We like babies and puppies and fresh things and new things that's exciting, that really gets our attention, that makes us joyful. But if we think about dying things or old things, we don't get excited about that. And that's exactly, what is so deluding. This is ignorance. Do not pay attention to this other part of life. And these different practices help us to train the mind by saying, okay, you need to look here as well, because this is also part of life. And then through doing this, the attachment to beginnings and to new things and fresh things and sweet things and soft things gets balanced out. And this is exactly what's needed, for insight to arise. Through this balancing out, the attachment to preferable perceptions gets slowly but surely, washed away. And that's the Pali word of viraga, dispassion. Dispassion sets in because the mind adapts to what it is, what it is seeing. It adapts. That's not something, we have to force the mind. But if you show it to the mind adapts. If you have an interest for those things. And then, if there's a certain washing away of craving and of attachment, then the mind is much more capable to see the whole spectrum, to see endings. And then, when the mind clearly sees endings and sees the other part of the equation, it just lets go because it understands. And I think that's, the essence of these practices we are doing today, to balance out, to cool down the mind. And the Asuba practice is, especially done when there's also like a lot of sexual lust, which can be very distracting, especially for monastics in the beginning of the training, can be a very helpful practice. But for anyone, who feels overwhelmed by sexual desire, it can be really helpful. Or, if we have a body which is not working well, where there is illness, it can also help us to get the whole picture and see, yes, this body is part of nature. It's not in my control. And, especially I've lived in Thailand for a few years, and there it's a very normal thing, for monastics in particular, to go to the mortuary and to look at corpses and see, when those corpses are investigated for, not when it's not clear, what the reason was that somebody died. They get cut open and there's certain investigations are made, and monastics, are allowed to kind of be part of that and observe that. And I have been many years ago in the mid 90s. I remember I went to the police mortuary in Bangkok, and it blew my mind, really, because I'd never really considered those things. So that was really very sobering, because it is part of life and we need to pay attention to it. And then also just, understanding in our own experience how little interest our culture in general has in those things. And, and I think, on the first look, it looks like, oh, it's really nice to not confront people with those issues. But actually, it makes our life on the long run much more difficult, because we get more and more unrealistic. And then when we have difficulties with our bodies, then we are completely blown away, because we never have considered that as a part of life. For example, there's a lot going on, like in the advertisement industry, with about skin. There are so many products. If you go to the drugstore for skin, hundreds of products we can buy, skin and hair. And in reality, the skin is simply an organ. It's an organ which purifies the body, eliminates waste, and, helps with cooling and warming. And it's where we meet the world. But the world meets us very different, if our skin is like soft and smooth, or if our skin is like wrinkly and blotchy. And then, if our skin has a different color, brown or black or golden, it can be threatening for our life, to not have the quote unquote right skin color. It's a huge amount of projection, a huge overlay. And then when you look at it for what it is, it's just skin. It's just an organ. But it can decide about so many things in your life if you don't have the skin color, which is considered the right one. And these days, this kind of conversation comes more and more in the mainstream because more and more people see how crazy that is and how scary that is and how unjust that is because it is completely fueled by ignorance. Yeah. So it's a very big theme, really. And it's not only about, dealing with sexual desire, but it's like it's much bigger than that. Just seeing, how much projection is connected with identifying with the body as me and mine, and how important it is, to give it attention, to balance that out. And, for example, wearing, if you, let's say you get your favorite new dress and then you wear that dress for a day and then you don't take it off in the evening, you go to bed with the dress and you don't take a shower, and the next day you wear it, and the next night, and then another day, and you don't take a shower. How does that dress look, after a few days? Imagine that. This is what the body produces. I don't mean only getting dirty from outside, but also, the body makes the dress dirty too. And this is something, we usually don't look at. And I think that's a very healthy thing to look at. But it's also important, to do those practices in combination with uplifting practices as well. And if you feel, that it doesn't really work for you, then by all means, put it down and do your usual practice or do some metta practice. We do that tomorrow anyway. So it's not about developing aversion to the body. That's not why we're doing this practice. It's to balancing it out. And also, if we already have aversion to the body because we think our body doesn't look like it should, that practice can also help us to get more into the middle. So it helps, in both ways to see this body is part of nature. And there's many things, going on in the body where we have no clue how the body knows, the whole hormonal system, digestion, the blood, the blood circulation. We don't know how the body is doing this. We could never do this, willfully. There's a great intelligence operating also. But it has its own ways and it doesn't care about our preferences because it belongs to nature. And these practices, help us to understand that very deeply. This body is part of nature. It belongs to nature. And, it's like a mounting animal, a riding animal, which we borrow from nature. And we look after it as good as we can. And when the time comes, we give it back. So, that's what we are considering today. And, please, if you don't find it helpful, then I invite you to just do your own practice. But if you do find it helpful, then please, we can do a guided meditation together so you can get some understanding how those themes, can be part of your meditation practice. And then you can, use either like 10 minutes at the beginning of each meditation to do it, or a whole meditation session. It can help us in particular, if we are caught up, for example, in, if we're very ungrounded and we need to come back into the body, it can really help us to come back and to ground. But can also help us if we are really, caught up in sexual lust in a way, which we find difficult, or if we have a body image about ourselves which is maybe negative, it can help us to balance that out as well. And it can also help us, to connect with a sense of awe for the body, how it does its job, day in and day out with so much intelligence. And, and knowing that this body has been, over the millions of years of evolution, how it has come to this point in history, and what a amazing process we are part of. So, that really helps us to loosen our identification with the body as me or mine, and seeing it as part of nature, what it truly is. And it leads to non-clinging, non-identification, non-clinging, and understanding ourselves more and more as part of a much bigger process, nature. And through that, there is a sense of enrichment can set in. And that enrichment supports the letting go of clinging. Because we don't feel, separate anymore, and, feeling, we didn't get the right eyes, or we didn't get the right this or that. And this practice can help us to see we are part of a much bigger process, and we can lean into this. So I think that's enough for today about speaking about it. And now I'd like to guide us in a meditation on Asuba. So we're going to start with the body parts, and then moving on to the elements after that. So find a posture you can sustain for about half an hour. And then I'm just going to read, those 5 body parts we can see with the eyes. First one is, and you just, you can have your eyes closed. And when I read the words, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to think about it. Just allow it to emerge in consciousness as you hear the words. And before we start with the meditation, you bring to mind again your motivation, your intention, why you are doing this. Why are you meditating with us today? Why did you come to this retreat? So we start with Kesa, hair of the head. You can probably feel hair of the head when you hear it. You don't have to make any particular effort, just allow it to emerge. Loma, hair of the body. Naka, nails. Danta, teeth. Tacho, skin. Tacho, skin. Danta, teeth. Naka, nails. Loma, hair of the body. Kesa, hair of the head. Kesa, hair of the head. Loma, hair of the body. Naka, nails. Danta, teeth. Tacho, skin. Tacho, skin. Danta, teeth. Naka, nails. Loma, hair of the body. Kesa, hair of the head. Kesa, hair of the head. Loma, hair of the body. Naka, nails. Danta, teeth. Tacho, skin. And now we can start, from the top of the head to just scan over the head down to the toes, just being aware of skin, head, neck, skin, shoulders, skin, upper arms, skin, lower arms, skin, hands, skin, torso, skin, pelvis, skin, upper legs, skin, lower legs, skin, and feet, skin. This body is completely enclosed by skin. And now we go to the next layer, which is flesh, which is that which is between the skin and the bones. There's the flesh. We can just start at the toes, the feet, flesh, the soft parts, lower legs, flesh, upper legs, flesh, pelvis, flesh, torso, flesh, hands, flesh, lower arms, flesh, upper arms, flesh, shoulders, flesh, neck, flesh, head, flesh. And now we go to the next layer, which is the bones. And the teeth are also part of the bones. And we start with the head, the skull, bones, neck, bones, shoulders, bones, upper arms, bones, lower arms, bones, and the hands, bones, torso, bones, the spine and the rib cage, pelvis, bones, upper legs, bones, lower legs, bones, and the feet, bones. So that's the body. You know how the eyes meet the body from outside. We did that before, and now going down the 3 layers. It's a simplified version rather than looking at it with the 32 parts. This is a simple way of looking at the body, which is very grounding and cooling. And from that, we are going now to look at the body in terms of the elements. There's 4 material elements, and we start with the earth element, which is particularly clear in the bones, the hardness, structure, hardness as opposed to softness. That's the quality of earth element. And we start on the head, being aware of earth element. Maybe you are pressing together your teeth. The hardness of that is a direct experience of earth element. We don't need to think about it or do anything particular. Just listening to what I'm saying, and then allow the mind to perceive earth element simply, directly. Connecting with the skeleton. Then we come to the neck, earth element. Shoulders, earth element. Upper arms, earth element. Lower arms, earth element. Hands, earth element. Torso, earth element. Pelvis, earth element. Upper legs, earth element. Lower legs, earth element. Feet, earth element. This body is permeated by earth element. Earth element internally and earth element externally in the mountains and the rocks is exactly the same earth element. Earth element is empty. empty of a self. And if we don't take in earth element through food for 1 or 2 months, this body is shutting down. It can't live without a constant exchange with the environment. And then we can also become aware of the cushion or the chair which we are sitting on, the hardness. That's the external earth element. It's just a manner of speaking, internal and external. In reality, they don't exist. Earth element is just earth element. And we are sitting on this vast earth element of the planet in constant exchange with it, sensing the gravity which keeps us pulled towards it. And then there's also some water element in there. Otherwise, the earth element would be just like quicksand. Water element stands for cohesion, fluidity, wetness. Water element. And we can be particularly aware of the water element in the flesh, the bloodstream, and all of the other liquids which permeate the flesh, fleshy parts of the body. We can start at the feet, becoming aware of water element. The lower legs, water element. Upper legs, water element. Pelvis, water element. Torso, water element. Shoulders, water element. Upper arms, water element. Lower arms, water element. Hands, water element. Torso, water element. Shoulders, water element. Neck, water element. The head, water element. This whole body is permeated by water element. Water element internally and water element externally are exactly the same. The rains and the rivers and lakes, the ocean. Water element is empty, empty of a self. And if we don't drink for about 3 days, the body shuts down. There needs to be a constant exchange. And internally and externally are just a manner of speaking. And for the water element, to operate in the body, it needs to have a certain temperature. If it's too cold, it freezes. If it's too hot, it evaporates. So there's only a certain temperature range where the body can really flourish, about between 35 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And This is the fire element, which is heat and coolness. And we can become aware of it in particular on the skin or in the mouth, palms of the hands, under the arms. Fire element comes from the sun, and we start sweeping, from the head. Fire element, neck. Fire element, shoulders. Fire element, torso. Fire element, pelvis. Fire element, upper legs. Fire element, lower legs. Fire element, and feet. Fire element. This whole body is permeated by fire element, which comes from the sun. And we can also, take it into the body by eating. So this digestion process produces fire element. Fire element internally and fire element externally are exactly the same. And temperature is a result of motion. And motion is the wind element. Expansion, contraction of the body when we are breathing in and breathing out, and movement per se. That's the wind element. Everything is in constant movement. Vibration, oscillation. And we can, feel that in the body, in particular through the breathing process. Arising and ceasing. Constant change, constant movement. It's the wind element. then the body is sitting in space, space element. There's also spaces in the body like the cavity of the mouth and the ears, rib cage, and space. We are sitting in space. The space doesn't end at the walls of the room, just goes on, limitless, space element. Listening into the space, listening into the silence, while at the same time, being aware of the body sitting and breathing in and breathing out in the periphery. And allowing the body to just dissolve into the space. This body is empty, empty of a self, which means it doesn't exist from its own side, but the body is a process, a coming together of causes and conditions, a coming together which is constantly changing. Because the body is empty, empty of a self. And that experience, helps us to wash away the clinging. Because if the mind sees clearly, it adapts. So being aware of the body's breathing, and at the same time being aware of the space and that which knows the body and the space. So dropping the objects now, the body and the space, and just being aware of the knowing. Conscious awareness. becoming aware of the subtle joy of being in the present moment, being the knowing. When the mind is not concerned with the body, with how it looks and how it works, the mind has let go just for this time. Temporary liberation of the mind. When greed and aversion and delusion have just temporarily be at peace, giving us this taste of the goal of the practice, letting go of all preferences, letting go of all clinging, and just being the knowing. We're soon coming to the ending of the meditation and then reflecting on impermanence. Even, a beautiful meditation has to end for now. Everything which has a beginning has an end. Just coming back to the body, earth element, earth element on earth element. And gently, opening your eyes and then reflecting on clarity. Clarity about all of those truths. The body is part of nature. and nature has its own intelligence, and we can align ourselves with that. Or if we don't, we will have a lot of more suffering than if we do. So that's the instructions for this morning. And it's a bit after 10 o'clock now, Mountain Time. And there's now time for you to choose, each what kind of meditation you like to do: walking, sitting, lying down, standing meditation, or any other meditation you'd like to do. And then it's your time till the meal reflection at 11:45, when we all can come together again. And there will be a session of for question and answers tonight. But if you have a burning question right now, for the day, and which can't wait, then we could do that now also. If you have something, please, raise your Zoom hand or your physical hand. Kathy Fairland.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the meditation. I had a question about the four elements because they're often presented as the four elements, but then there's sometimes this fifth element called space.
Yeah.
And I wondered just how that all fits together, and if you could say something more about the space element and how it fits with the other four elements.
I mean, it's just part of what reality is consisting of. I don't think there's much to be said. So four are material elements, and then space element is immaterial element, and then there's also the consciousness element. And this is just one way of looking at life. We can look at it in this way. They are all concepts. They are all ways of approaching it with the human mind. They are not ultimate entities, but this is a way how we can experience it through, for example, the earth element we experience as hardness or softness, and the water element we experience as wetness and fluidity and cohesion. And the space element, I think, we experience as empty of material elements. So it's like a very personal experience, and there's not much to be said other than really, opening your mind to it and experience it directly rather than speaking about it. And that's exactly the challenge, for many people. They want to philosophize about it. And, and to question, why do you need to have a philosophy about it if you can actually directly experience it, you know? There's some kind of shying away from direct experience, maybe, and wanting to have more information. But the real benefit lies in the direct experience, which through understanding is productive of wisdom. Does that make sense?
Yes, so if I understood, then it can be either space as space or consciousness.
Then, consciousness and space are two different ways of looking at the same experience. If I'm like listening is a good approximation of how we can connect. If I listen into the space, I'm aware just of the expansion, That would be an experience of space element expansion. And then when I drop the expansion and be aware of that which knows the expansion, that would be the consciousness, the knowing of the expansion. But it's all ways of speaking, and they are very limited because the language is limited, you know. But that's as far as we can speak about it. Then we have to do it, and then we know. So maybe try that, and then tonight at the Q&A, if it's still not clear, we can clarify further, if as far as language allows us to do that. You know, it's that uncertainty which we need to be with and just keep on asking and keep on experimenting. And then it starts to dawn on us, you know, like the sun dawns in the morning. It's not going to be up like immediately, quick, everything. It takes time, you know. So maybe you have to, you know, try to do that like 20 times, and then you know it is you understand more and more about it, because it has to kind of come through all layers of ideas of what it should be. Okay, so and please try it out, and then please bring your questions again this evening and see how it goes. Okay, Kathy and Jen.
I just want to thank you so, so much for this very powerful meditation. I think that that's honestly one of the few times in my life that I've really felt part of nature.
Thank you.
So solidified in sort of this deep self consciousness that's so constricting.
Yes,
And
isn't it?
I, through the meditation today, I was able to feel the spaciousness and the lack of self.
Yeah, thank you.
Not self, but you know, um,
The empty of a self, yeah. And
yeah,
you know, and the art is really to be in the balance, you know, because we do exist, because I can see you and you can see me, so we do exist, but we don't exist in the way we think we exist. We exist not from our own side. We do exist as processes, you know, of coming together of all of these elements, but it's a constant changing process. It's like a stream, and this is what needs to be understood. It's not about not caring about the body and throwing it, thinking, oh, I'm part of nature. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to look after my body. Of course, we need to. But we need to see we are not looking after it like this, like desperately, kind of clinging and trying to control it. But it's more like, okay, working in tandem with nature, you know, being in the middle. It's all about the middle path. It's all about balance. and and then, you know, these different ways of looking, which are unusual ways of looking, by paying attention to features of experience we usually don't pay attention to, then wisdom dawns on us, you know, like the sun in the morning rising. We can't force it, but we can put causes and conditions in place. And you know, thank you, Chen, for you know,
thank you.
being here and trying to do this too. Thank you.
This is the honestly having it's so you can know you can try and understand these things philosophically, but until you have that felt sense, you never really understand.
Yeah. And then you don't, you know, then it's not going to inform your life. And that's why wisdom is experience understood.
Yeah,
And then, you know, in life, when things come up and you're triggered or challenged, you don't start, oh, thinking, what did she say on Sunday? That's not wisdom, you know.
it
Wisdom is
already
like intuitively, it just comes.
yeah, and it kind of dwells in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chen. And Leslie Elstead, or something like that.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. I'm curious about ways to work with this preference for youth and beauty. It seems like it's part of our survival
Sure.
system to prefer youth and beauty because it reminds us of the strength of young life. And so it's like very intuitive and natural to have that preference.
But also, like age and experience has a lot to do also with wisdom, and this is also intuitive.
Mm,
That when you're gonna ask for advice, you're not gonna go to a 5-year-old. You're gonna go to an old person who has lived long, isn't
yes.
it?
Yeah.
So, but to see that our culture kind of doesn't honor that.
Mm,
Our culture wants only young people with smooth skin and very slim and all of that stuff, or babies. I mean, we all love babies. I love that too. It's like
yeah.
inbuilt in the body. You just want to cuddle it and protect it and all of that. But I think it's more like, because in some cultures, like in Thailand, for example, in more traditional cultures, or in India, or so, old people are still getting much more respect as in our culture. So I think the so-called developed countries, they have a certain disrespect for old age, which is actually not instinctive, which is just conditioned. And I'm just speaking about that, it's not about preferring, but it's just about balancing it out and seeing how the consumerist element in the culture has added something, to it, which is actually not intuitive. It just has become more and more part of, if you want to survive as a woman. I mean, I think it has probably been since a long time like that. If you want to survive as a woman, okay, you think you need to be beautiful. Otherwise, you need to be maybe very smart or something. It's just very difficult. Um, but I think, so it's not just intuitive, I think, to want to lean towards the young.
Mm,
But I think that's more like a cultural extra import, which is not so deep yet, because I think this is more maybe the last 100 years or so that this is becoming more and more that, old age is going to be shoved away into a corner and separated from daily life, and not honored. I think that's more a recent thing in our society too, because we have still short, we have been also quite, traditional
mm.
that way. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. But I also know it's very strongly conditioned. So just to know intellectually isn't enough. I have to train my mind, retrain my mind. And also some old people can be very difficult. They can be, because they have so much loss. And I'm getting old myself, so I'm speaking for myself as well. Loss, pain and suffering. And sometimes they've had a difficult life and they can get kind of grumpy and
Yeah, but
challenging.
also, some young people are difficult. Even, they are very young and they are difficult. So I don't see that this is connected, you know,
Uh,
with age to be difficult.
no, but it is a stereotype, I suppose, in a way, because the mind gets stiffer, the beliefs get more set for some old people, and it's like, oh, there goes grandma again. On the memory goes, and you listen to the same stories 10
Yeah,
times.
that people, who that's why we do what we are doing now, so that we don't become like those people, because that's only people who haven't really looked after their minds. But if somebody has lived a long time and really cultivated their mind, they are a great blessing for the world, because
Yeah.
they have seen everything, and because of that, they have a lot of wisdom and courage, because they have, and a lot of equanimity, because they have seen the ups and downs, forever.
I agree. And so I'm just working with the truth of my own experience, like with my grandparent, my own mother, that there is some wisdom, but there's also the other side.
Yeah, but they were probably not meditating much, did they?
No.
Yeah, of course. That doesn't just come from becoming old. Becoming old isn't like necessarily productive of wisdom, but
Yeah.
but it can be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say let's now only speak about questions which you need to have clarified for the day, so that we get to the evening and that you can practice, and then everything else we could do in the evening when we anyway have a Q&A. So is there anything necessary to clear before the evening? Then, Chen, do you have your hand still up? No, you don't. Okay, let me see if there's somebody else. No. Okay, because I think let's just like protect the space for really using it as a practice space. And then in the evening, when the minds are a little bit more exhausted, then we can do more speaking. And now, just really using the freshness of the day to really look at the body in regards to what I was mentioning, the body parts and the elements. And if you feel like it's not conducive for you because that's not what you need, then you do something else. And yeah, and then we meet for the meal reflection at 11:45 mountain time. That would be 10:45 Pacific time. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, and see you soon.